and welcome to Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me today is Dennis Lewis, and he's the program manager for the Calaveras Citizens Corps and is representing CERT tonight. Dennis, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Great to have you on the show. And before we get into the nuts and bolts, I wanted to have you define CERT, C-E-R-T, for people so they know what we're talking about today.
CERT stands for Community Emergency Response Team, and it's basically your average resident that will assist in any emergency situation where we could help any emergency responder like fire or police and do things that normally would take a firefighter to do, but doesn't require firefighter skills to do. So
as we go into that more later on in the show, we'll talk about all the different facets of that. But before we do, I was hoping to introduce you to our viewers. First of all, where'd you grow up? And then talk me through how you eventually ended up here.
I was born and raised in a little logging community called Scotia in Humboldt County. I graduated from high school at Fortuna High School, joined the Marine Corps. Went to Vietnam, got back out, didn't know what I was going to do, and went to an interview at Redwood, College of the Redwoods, and a gentleman there named Colonel Van E. Tanner asked me, "What do you think of law enforcement?" And I said, "I don't know, I've never thought about it." He said, "Why don't you give it a try, see if you like it?" So I tried it, and 35 years later, I must have liked it because I retired.
Where'd you work over those years?
I worked in a little town called Riodale at first for almost a year, and then I went to City of Newark in Alameda County. I worked there for 10 years. And then for about 25 years, I transferred to Lodi and retired out of Lodi PD.
When you were working in Lodi, what are a few of the different jobs you had down there?
Narcotics. I worked narcotics and undercover for a while. I did basically patrol and did patrol division. Patrolled the streets, worked as a police officer. I've worked as a homicide detective, crimes against persons, crimes against property. I did traffic division.
How'd you like being a police officer?
I'm glad it's over. It was all right. It got me to be able to help people when they needed the help the most.
But at the same time, there are some downsides to the job?
There's definitely some downsides to the job. There's some things that you can't help but take home with you that you shouldn't be able to take home or shouldn't take home, but it's just the nature of the business.
One thing you mentioned earlier was near where you grew up, there used to be one of the largest lumber mills?
Yeah, Pacific Lumber Company was the largest redwood mill in the world at the time.
And are there still a ton of redwoods up where you live, or have most of them been cut down? Or?
No, there's still a lot of redwoods. If you go up Highway 101 and you go through the Avenue of the Giants, you'll see trees that are larger than, I don't know, probably half the size of this room.
So compare what you see there to our Big Trees State Park. What is the difference?
Well, your ponderosa pine are pretty large, but your redwood trees, they're 3-4 times that large.
Wow.
Matter of fact, they're so large that loggers are now logging stumps that they logged trees off of 60, 70, 80 years ago.
Just because there's so much wood left?
Because there's so much wood left, and they're on a slope that's like almost straight up and down. So the guy on the uphill side would be standing, and the guy on the downhill side would have to build a scaffolding that would be 10, 15 foot tall in order to cut that tree down.
Wow. So you grew up in the trees, and now you've retired to the trees. Where did you end up in this county?
I live outside of West Point, about 15 miles off the grid.
And tell me what it's like to be in Calaveras County off the grid. Do you love it, hate it?
Oh, I love it. And instead of hearing horns honk and neighbors' dogs bark, I have coyotes howling. I have turkeys going up and down trees. I have a troublesome bear that likes to get in my apple trees and just sit there and break my apple.
Yeah, they can really wreak havoc sometimes. I've had a couple troublesome bears at various ranches that I've been able to spend some time, and they also will destroy a fig tree pretty easily.
Oh yeah, they like to sit in that big thick bough, and then they're lazy, and they'll reach up and they'll grab a branch that has apples and they'll pull that branch down. Well, it breaks the branch is what it does. So they won't stand up to go get it. They'll bring the branch down to them.
What are some things that made you choose Calaveras County as a place to retire?
I started looking, probably about 2 years before I retired, and I liked the community, and I liked the people that I met here. and I saw an opportunity to retire and make some new friends.
And are you an outdoorsman?
Yes and no. I was a scoutmaster for a number of years and started several troops when I was in Lodi, and I enjoyed taking the kids out in the outdoors and teaching them how to track and how to build a shelter and how to survive in the wilderness.
I've noticed from what we've talked about tonight that you tend to be an instigator in terms of starting things. And I just want people to know what you did down in Lodi when you were a police officer in terms of helping kids get some gifts. So what was that program called?
I started a program called Lodi Adopt a Child, and it was basically, I asked the Lodi citizens to adopt a child's wish. And it started as a Christmas program for about 30 children in 1989. And then when I left the program in 2006, there were 1,500 children in that program.
And this continues on today? And
it continues on today, and it's more than just a Christmas program. They do a shopping spree for about 100 children and give the children $100, $150 to go out and buy clothes with a chaperone. We do there's a financial program for families that need a helping hand for a little bit, where they'll pay for their insurance in their car, and pay their house payment for a while. And then I started a skid lid program for kids without bicycle helmets. So the police officers, instead of giving the kid a ticket, could give the kid a helmet.
Very cool. As you moved into retirement, did you find that you liked being less involved, or that you needed something to keep you busy?
Yeah, I don't think it was so much as to find something to keep me busy, because when you live 15 miles off the grid, there is not an unbusy day.
Yeah.
Okay, because you've got to get wood, you got to prepare for the winter, you've got to cut 100 foot of fire break around your house and your property, and if you have any animals, you got to tend to those, and maintain your roads, and that type of thing. It was more than, one day I was coming, to tell you how I got started, one day I was coming home from work, and I'm in a police uniform from Lodi, and I'm crossing the bridge there at Blue Creek on a logging road, and I look down the creek and I can see a couple that are roasting marshmallows, and their fire has flames shooting about 25 foot in the air, and they're standing about 15 foot back with a stick trying to roast their marshmallows. It was so hot. So I called the fire agency, and they responded, and they talked to them and what have you. And then the next day, because I was in uniform, so I didn't want to go down and create a problem, so I had them do it. But the next day I got a phone message on my phone saying that the next time I called, I needed to call Amador, because I was on the other side of the McCollum River instead of a creek. They didn't know where they were. So that's how I got started in this. That's exactly how I got started.
How did that interaction lead to you getting involved, though?
At the time, the then supervisor, Steve Walensky, had started to put together some town hall meetings in District 2 in Calaveras, and which included Railroad Flat and Mountain Ranch and West Point and Wilseyville. And so we started attending those, and those led to other meetings, and each community was to put together an emergency preparedness plan for their community, because each community in Calaveras is unique. It's very different. Those that live up in the hills and the mountains is different than those that live down here in San Andreas, and those that live in San Andreas is different than Angels Camp. And so each community was to put together a plan for their community and their residents, how to escape, during the winter. For instance, West Point during the winter has only one road in, one road out. And if there's a wildland fire during the summer, we're going to need other avenues of escape. And so we put together a plan with Sierra Pacific Industries and the Forest Service to generate 3 other roadways out that are logging roads that we try to keep maintained and open. And those led to West Point starting Red Cross training, and we got some disaster services training, and then that led to Citizen Corps and CERT training, and CERT does a little bit more than Red Cross as far as disaster services are concerned. And so I looked at it as the Red Cross was going to be the left hand, and CERT was going to be the right hand, and they both work well together.
And the idea is to get this whole team of community members that can work with Red Cross, which also supports the agencies that are always working around the clock, fire, police services, in the case of a disaster?
Yes, sir.
And the Citizen Corps, is that something that's mandatory or voluntary?
It's all voluntary, and basically what FEMA, it's a FEMA-sponsored program, Citizen Corps and CERT. What FEMA likes to see is all aspects of your community. They'd like to see a politician, a minister, fire, police, Joe Blow citizen, next door neighbor. Mm-hmm. So we have a core of about 25 folks from throughout Calaveras. Every community is represented. We have folks from Ebbets Pass, Copperopolis, and everywhere in between.
And where do these people meet and how often?
We meet once a quarter. The Citizen Corps meets once a quarter. Right now we're meeting at San Andreas Fire. We just had our monthly meeting this last month, and so we won't meet again until July. And basically it's to which way do we want to go? And we try to keep track on how the communities are developing their disaster plan. For example, Mulk Hill, right now they're concentrating on getting their designated disaster shelters and evacuation shelters Red Cross certified. So the Red Cross will have a list of what is available at the Mulk Hill Town Hall, what isn't there, and what they need to put together within 3 days to send there. An example would be showers. There's no place to take a shower if we used a Mulk Hill Town Hall for a shelter. We might need to have portable bathrooms that are handicap accessible. We might need a kitchen. And so Red Cross would have this list of things that are there and things that aren't there, so that those first 3 days they can put the things that aren't there together and ship those up there within 72 hours.
What are some events that qualify as being disasters?
Let's see. Chief Young here in San Andreas this last winter activated his CERT team to open up a shelter at the town hall when the community right here on the outside of the studio here wasn't threatening to be flooded, the little trailer park, so that we could have a place for them to go in case it needed to be evacuated. We did Dennis Hansen's funeral, Cal Fire, a distinguished Cal Fire firefighter, his funeral. CERT participated and directed traffic and crowd control to make sure that everybody could cross the street from the church there at West Point to the community hall where the gathering was going to be.
So it's kind of a wide range of things that the CERT teams can be used for?
Yes, sir.
But there could be something as big as, let's say, a wildfire or a giant storm that would, or maybe an explosion or something like that, where there are lots of resources coming in. You guys would be used for that as well, or could be?
Yes, we could, and we have. We've done several drills. The first one we did was last year in West Point that involved a 60,000-gallon propane tank. And the scenario was a vehicle accident into the propane tank, which threatened a little community on Blagan Boulevard in Wilseyville. And so what happened was West Point Fire responded and then notified OES, County OES.
What does that stand for?
Office of Emergency Services, which is out of the Sheriff's Department. Mm-hmm. And then they notified other responding agencies from mutual aid, which included CERT to assist with the evacuation of I think there's about 20, 25 homes. So we did an evacuation notice. We went door to door. And instead of evacuating everybody, we handed them a little card that said, had this been evacuation, you would have been directed where to go. And then Red Cross opened up a shelter inside of West Point and where they would go. And fire responded and took care of the accident. And during that time, a firefighter was injured. Make-believe firefighter was injured, and they had to extricate this person. And so basically, every agency and organization that participated honed some skills that they would need to use during an actual emergency. And one of the main skills is being able to communicate with each other, because that sometimes becomes a problem, especially up here.
Did you identify some weaknesses, maybe communication being one of them, that you all recognize need to be addressed?
Yes, we did. Some of the weaknesses, and one of the major weaknesses, is that California Highway Patrol can't talk to fire. Fire can't talk to California Highway Patrol on radio. And so when we did the disaster drill this year up in Mountain Ranch, which involved a warming center that Red Cross had opened up in Mountain Ranch because the power had been out for 2 days and wasn't expected to be back on for another 3 days. And so they opened up a warming center. Well, when that was going on and Red Cross was doing that, a tour bus, a make-believe tour bus out of San Francisco with about 70 people on it, slid on black ice through a power pole, dropped power lines on top of it, and we're sitting on the edge of a precipice, just teetering. And so fire had to respond, and then they had to figure out how to get around the down power lines and notify PG&E, and they responded with their rigs to turn the power off, and then CERT helped them extricate the victims out of the bus, transported them to the ambulance that showed up, transported them to the walking wounded to the shelter, and then the Red Cross had to transition from a warming center to an actual shelter where people were going to be spending the night.
So this is real life stuff, you know, in terms of how you guys are treating it. People take this seriously in terms of the scenarios. Exactly,
and the error with the communication that we made last year, we corrected this year by having ham radio operators, which is your American Amateur Radio Emergency Society, RACES and ARES, which are ham radio operators. We activated them, and so there was a ham radio operator shadow with the CHP unit, with the fire unit, with the Red Cross unit, so that we could all communicate at the same time.
Very cool. So the community is getting involved in that way. Are they CERT members or just random radio people?
No, they belong to Calaveras Amateur Radio Society.
And they were contacted by you?
And they were activated by us, and then they're part of the Citizen Corps. They have a representative that sits on the Citizen Corps board, as well as a Red Cross, Calaveras Office of Emergency Services. We have the combined Calaveras Fire Chiefs Association. They're also represented.
When you go through a scenario, do you have a meeting afterward to kind of break everything down, how things went, or do you talk right after it, or how does it work?
Well, generally we have a hot wash afterwards, what's called a hot wash afterwards, where you sit down and you go over what went right, what went wrong, how can we improve, what are we going to do next year. And that was being put together by Sergeant Whiting of the Sheriff's Department, and she's actually the sergeant that's in charge of Office of Emergency Services for Calaveras. However, the tragedy in Valley Springs has taken precedence over that, so we have not had that for this year.
Well, let's in your mind, if you were to make a presentation at that meeting, what do you think some of the strengths are that this county has in terms of its response?
Being able to work together. Different agencies sometimes cannot work with a different agency that is not just within the fire service, but fire and police. There's always been some little bit of animosity between fire and police, and I speak from experience when I talk about that. And that's not prevalent here. Some fire districts didn't get along with other fire districts. That's not prevalent here. Working with NGOs, non-government organizations like the Red Cross and Fire, or CHP, or the Post 108 ambulance and PHI Air Med that responded during our last disaster scenario that we did up in Mountain Ranch. We all worked well together, and everybody learned something, and we made some mistakes, and we're going to hone those errors so that we don't make the same one. We did not make the same mistakes this year that we made last year. This year we made new ones.
Okay.
And then the disaster drill for 2014 is scheduled next year sometime in April, and that will be done in outside of Valley Springs.
Do you know what the scenario is yet?
I know what the basic scenario is going to be.
Is that a surprise to some of the participants?
No, not really. Basically, it will involve the 24-inch gas main that comes up from the valley and comes all the way up here to San Andreas. And there will be basically a gentleman will be using a backhoe and will hit that main and cause it to rupture, and that will start a wildland fire, which is pushed by 30-mile-an-hour winds. So the fire department has to respond and deal with the gas leak with PG&E and what their response time is going to be, and then mutual aid goes out from there.
Wow, that sounds like a good scenario. I like it.
It's going to be bigger. Each year, the first year was a pretty good size. Last year, this last one was big. Next year is going to be, I believe, bigger. Chief Olson from Calco Fire, it's his baby. He gets to put that thing on, and he's looking forward to it, and he's got a pretty good scenarios set up.
I've noticed Chief Olson seems to be a pretty sharp guy. He noticed some things in the fire district that weren't right down there, got those corrected. He's gotten some unification going on there, so
yes.
I'm glad to see he's involved.
Yes, yes.
Who is in command of all these different players when a scenario goes down? Who calls the shots?
For CERT, it would be the sponsoring fire agency. Let's say San Andreas, let's say Chief Young here in San Andreas wants to open up a shelter because he has a flooding problem. And so he'll notify his team lead that he needs CERT to open up a shelter. And that team lead is Dana Nichols. Mm-hmm. And he would notify his team that they need to open up a shelter. And he would, if he needed more CERT people, then he would call me. And then I would notify the other CERT members, and they would get together and assist them with that scenario. In Calaveras County, we have over 80 Red Cross disaster service workers that are trained, and we have over 60 that are CERT members.
What, in your mind, are those numbers adequate? Do you need more?
Oh, we need more. We definitely need more. With any volunteer organization, you have a rule of 1/3. Whenever you need volunteers, you're only going to be able to get 1/3 of the total amount that you have to respond at any given time. So if you have 60, that means that you're going to have 20 that's going to be available. All right, and 20 might seem a lot, but when you have a lot of things that need to be done all at the same time, and that should have been done like yesterday, 20 is not enough.
Sure. And in terms of how the CERT members are distributed around the county, paint a picture for the audience of what it looks like in terms of districts or CERT groups.
Each CERT team is sponsored by a fire district, a fire department. To give you an example, there are 12 members in the West Point CERT. There are 8 members in the Central Calaveras Fire District CERT. San Andreas has a CERT team. Moke Hill has a CERT team. Copperopolis will have a CERT team as of this coming Sunday because we're doing the training there now. Calco, which is the combination of Jenny Lind Fire and Foothill Fire, they have a CERT team. But with each of these teams is also a Red Cross team that can actually open and operate a shelter. And secure from Red Cross. Before, Calaveras used to have to wait for Red Cross people to come from San Joaquin County, Sacramento County, Tuolumne County. And when you have a single family fire, you have firefighters sitting there with a family that are waiting for hours and hours and sometimes 6, 7, 8 hours for somebody to respond. They don't have to do that now. But each district will have our goal is for each fire district in the county to have a CERT team of 7 or more, and to have a Red Cross team.
What areas of the county have yet to implement these teams?
We have training scheduled, and we're in negotiations to do training for both Red Cross Disaster Services and CERT. In Murphy's, they have a Red Cross team, and we're trying to put together a CERT team. Ebbets Pass, the same thing. Altaville Malones and Angel Camp. And we're putting together the training for Copperopolis, and that should complete all 10 districts and the city of Angels Camp.
So by the end of this year, is it safe to say the county is going to be covered to some extent? Maybe the teams aren't big enough, but at least someone is established in every district?
Yes, as a matter of fact, we have 3 members of the CERT team that are in Murphy's right now, but you need to have at least a 7 or a 6 or 7 man team because of that 30% rule. And Ebbets Pass has 1, but they're so close that they can combine and have 4 for any incident in either one of those 2 fire districts. And then we can respond from West Point, we can respond from Copper, from San Andreas, and we can supplement any district that needs CERT members or Red Cross.
So based on the incident, either the local team can handle it, or you can all coalesce together into one big team to handle a really big one.
Yes,
so
sir.
it's very flexible and versatile, it sounds like.
It's extremely flexible and versatile, and we're still learning.
Yeah.
We are still learning. trying to work together with CAL FIRE, because CAL FIRE does all dispatching of fire agencies in Calaveras County. Trying to get a method where we could be on call and be notified that a fire department is requesting CERT, and without adding more burden to what they already have to do.
And this is all volunteer based.
Yes, sir, it's all volunteer.
But there's some support in terms of equipment from FEMA?
Yes, FEMA issues a traffic vest, which is the reflective vest. They issue an N95 mask, which is basically your weed eater mask that you buy at a hardware store. Goggles, protective goggles, knee pads, a backpack to store your gear in, work gloves, and then we try to also supply non-latex medical gloves. And
if people want to get involved, how do they go about doing that?
For CERT, they need to contact their fire agency and ask them if they have an existing CERT program and how they can get involved, and that fire agency will explain how to do that. For Red Cross, they just need to dial the 1-800 Red Cross number and ask the same question.
How much training is involved?
For Red Cross, it's 21 hours, and I have that split up into 2 full 8-hour Saturdays and a half a Sunday, because the half a Sunday is actual application of what they have learned. In other words, they'll actually put out a small fire, they'll do some cribbing to lift some heavy objects off of somebody, they'll do a building search, an extrication, they'll do medical triage, and they'll do bandaging on that Sunday.
What do people like about completing that training and getting going on the team?
They have a sense of knowing what to do when it happens. That's one of the main things that I've noticed in Calaveras County is the people here just want some direction. What do I do and how do I do it? And they're just thirsty for that kind of knowledge. And CERT and the Red Cross is willing to provide that knowledge.
And you personally, when you reflect on all the work you've put into it as a program manager and someone who really organizes a lot, what do you personally get out of this?
Knowing that I have taught somebody to do something that may save somebody's life. I'm reminded of something that came out of the Bible is you can give people food one time, or you can teach somebody how to fish and feed them forever.
Dennis, I thank you for joining us on the program, and I hope we can have you back to talk more about this at a later time.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And as always, I want to thank you for joining me on Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and I hope to see you right here next time.